Hi friends, Mrs. Turner here with the next installment of the Miraculous Adventures of Edward Tulane. It is being read aloud with permission from Scholastic. When we left off, Bryce and Edward were basically on the street corners trying to raise money. They left the dad and his sister, Sarah Ruth, had passed away, and they were going to get something to eat. So here is chapter 21. It says Neil's Diner. The diner was called Neil's. The word was written in big red neon letters that flashed on and off. Inside it was warm and bright and smelled like fried chicken and toast and coffee. Bryce sat at the counter and put Edward on a stool next to him. He leaned the rabbit's forehead up against the counter so that he would not fall. "What you gonna have, sugar?" the waitress said to Bryce. "Give me some pancakes," said Bryce, "and some eggs, and I want a steak too. I want a big old steak and some toast and some coffee." The waitress leaned forward and pulled at one of Edward's ears and then pushed him backward so that she could see his face. "This your rabbit?" she said to Bryce. "Yes, ma'am. He's mine now. He belonged to my sister." Bryce wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. "We're in show business, me and him." "Is that right?" said the waitress. She had a name tag on the front of her dress. "Marlene," it said. She looked at Edward's face, and then she let go of his ear, and he fell forward so that his head rested against the counter again. "Go ahead, Marlene," thought Edward. "Push me around. Do with me as you will. What does it matter? I am broken, broken." The food came, and Bryce ate all of it without even looking up from his plate. "Well, you was hungry for sure," said Marlene as she cleared away the plates. "I reckon show business is hard work." "Yes'm," said Bryce. Marlene tucked the check under the coffee cup. Bryce picked it up and looked at it and then shook his head. "I ain't got enough," he said to Edward. "Ma'am," he said to Marlene when she came back and filled up his coffee cup, "I ain't got enough." "What, sugar?" "I ain't got enough money." She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. "You're going to have to talk to Neil about that." Neil, it turned out, was both the owner and the cook. He was a large, red-haired, red-faced man who came out of the kitchen holding a spatula in one hand. "You came in here hungry, right?" he said to Bryce. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "And you ordered some food, and I cooked it, and Marlene brought it to you, right?" "I reckon," said Bryce. "You reckon," said Neil. He brought the spatula down on the countertop with a thwack. Bryce jumped. "Yes, sir. No, sir. I cooked it for you," said Neil. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He picked Edward up off the stool and held him close. Everyone in the diner had stopped eating. They were all staring at the boy and the rabbit and Neil. Only Marlene looked away. "You ordered it. I cooked it. Marlene served it. You ate it. Now," said Neil, "I want my money." He tapped the spatula lightly on the counter. Bryce cleared his throat. "You ever seen a rabbit dance?" he said. "How's that?" said Neil. "You ever before in your life seen a rabbit dance?" Bryce set Edward on the floor and started pulling the strings attached to his feet, making him do a slow shuffle. He put his harmonica in his mouth and played a sad song that went along with the dance. Somebody laughed. Bryce took the harmonica out of his mouth and said, "He could dance some more if you want him to. He could dance to pay for what I ate." Neil stared at Bryce, and then without warning, he reached down and grabbed hold of Edward. "This is what I think of dancing rabbits," said Neil, and he swung Edward by his feet, swung him so that his head hit the edge of the counter hard. There was a loud thwack. Bryce screamed, and the world, Edward's world, went black. Chapter 22. There's the picture. That's the cover. It was dusk, and Edward was walking down a sidewalk. He was walking on his own, putting one foot in front of the other without any assistance from anybody. He was wearing a fine suit made out of red silk. He walked down the sidewalk, and then he turned onto a path that led up to a house with lighted windows. "I know this house," thought Edward. "This is Abeline's house. I'm on Egypt Street." Lucy came running out the front door of the house, barking and jumping and wagging her tail. "Down, girl," said a deep, gruff voice. Edward looked up, and there was Bull, standing at the door. Hello, Malone, said Bull. Hello, good old Rabbit Pie. We've been waiting for you. Bull swung the door wide and Edward walked inside. Abilene was there, and Nellie, and Lawrence, and Bryce. Susanna, called Nellie. Jangles, said Bryce. Edward, said Abilene. She held out his arms to him. But Edward stood still. He looked around the room. You're searching for Sarah Ruth, Bryce asked. Edward nodded. You got to go outside if you want to see Sarah Ruth, said Bryce. So they all went outside, Lucy and Bull and Nellie and Lawrence and Bryce and Abilene and Edward. Right here, said Bryce. He pointed up at the stars. Yep, said Lawrence. That is the Sarah Ruth constellation. He picked Edward up and put him on his shoulder. You can see it right there. Edward felt a pang of sorrow, deep and sweet and familiar. Why did she have to be so far away? If only I had wings, he thought, I could fly to her. Out of the corner of his eye, the rabbit saw something flutter. Edward looked over his shoulders, and there they were, the most magnificent wings he had ever seen, orange and red and blue and yellow, and they were on his back. They belonged to him. They were his wings. What a wonderful night this was. He was walking on his own. He had an elegant new suit, and now he had wings. He could fly anywhere, do anything. Why had he never realized this before? His heart soared inside of him. He spread his wings and flew off Lawrence's shoulders, out of his hands, and up into the nighttime sky, towards the stars, towards Sarah Ruth. No, shouted Abilene. Catch him, said Bryce. Edward flew higher. Lucy barked. Malone, shouted Bull, and with a terrific lunge, he grabbed hold of Edward's feet and pulled him out of the sky and wrestled him to earth. You can't go yet, said Bull. Stay with us, said Abilene. Edward beat his wings, but it was no use. Bull held him firmly to the ground. Stay with us, repeated Abilene. Edward started to cry. I couldn't stand to lose you again, said Nellie. Neither could I, said Abilene. It would break my heart. Lucy bent her face to Edward's. She licked his tears away. What do you think happened there? Think about what happened in the diner and where Sarah Ruth is, right? She passed away. What do you think might be going on there? Chapter 23. Exceedingly well made, said the man who was running a warm cloth over Edward's face. A work of art, I would say, a surpassingly, unbelievably dirty work of art, but art nevertheless, and dirt can be dealt with, just as your broken head has been dealt with. Edward looked into the eyes of the man. Ah, there you are, the man said. I can see that you're listening now. Your head was broken. I fixed it. I brought you back from the world of the dead. My heart, thought Edward, my heart is broken. No need to thank me, the man said. It's my job, quite literally. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Lucius Clark, doll mender. Your head, may I tell you, will it upset you? Well, I always tell the truth. I always say the truth must be met head on, no pun intended. Your head, young sir, was in 21 pieces. Hold on, guys. Ace, stop it. Sorry, my puppy dog. 21 pieces, Edward repeated mindlessly. Lucius Clark nodded. 21, he said. All modesty aside, I must admit that a lesser doll mender, a doll mender without my skills, might not be able to rescue you. But let's not speak of what might have been. Let us speak instead of what is. You are whole. You've been pulled back from the brink of oblivion by your humble servant, Lucius Clark. And here Lucius Clark put his hand on his chest and bowed deeply to Edward. This was quite a speech to wake up to, and Edward lay on his back trying to absorb it. He was on a wooden table. He was in a room with sunshine pouring in from high windows. His head apparently had been in 21 pieces and now was put back together into one. He was not wearing a red suit. In fact, he had no clothes on at all. He was naked again, and he did not have wings. And then he remembered. Bryce, the diner, Neil swinging him through the air. Bryce. You are wondering perhaps about your young friend, said Lucius, the one with the continually running nose. Yes, he brought you here, weeping and begging for my assistance. Put him together again, he said. Put him back together. I told him, I said, young sir, I am a businessman. I can put your rabbit back together again for a price. The question is, can you pay this price? He could not, of course. He could not. He said that he could not. I told him then that he had two options, only two. The first option being that he seek assistance elsewhere. Option 2 was that I would fix you to the very best of my considerable abilities and then you would become mine, his no longer, but mine. Here Lucius felt silent. He nodded, agreeing with himself. Two options only, he said, and your friend chose option 2. He gave you up so that you could be healed. Extraordinary, really. Bryce, thought Edward. Lucius Clark clapped his hands together. But no worries, my friend, no worries. I fully intend to keep up my end of the bargain. I will restore you to what I perceive to be your former glory. You shall have rabbit fur ears and a rabbit fur tail. Your whiskers will be repaired and replaced. Your eyes repainted to a bright and stunning blue. You will be clothed in the finest suits. And then someday I will reap the return on my investment in you. All in good time, all in good time. In the doll business, we have a saying. There is real time and there is doll time. You, my friend, have entered doll time. Read one more. Chapter 24. Look who's come to see him as Bryce. And so Edward Tulane was mended, put together again, cleaned and polished, dressed in an elegant suit, and placed on a high shelf for display. From his shelf, Edward could see the whole shop, Lucius Clark's workbench, and the windows to the outside world, and the door that the customers used to enter and leave. From his shelf, Edward saw Bryce open the door one day and stand in the threshold, the silver harmonica in his left hand flashing brilliantly in the sunlight, flooding in through the windows. "Young sir," said Lucius, "I am afraid that we have made a deal." "Can I see him?" asked Bryce. He wiped his hand across his nose, and the gesture filled Edward with a terrible feeling of love and loss. "I just want to look at him." "You may look." What's going on here? Okay. "You may look," he said. "You may look, and then you must go, and not come back. I cannot have you in my shop every day mooning over what you have lost." "Yes, sir," said Bryce. Lucius sighed again. He got up from his workbench and went to Edward's shelf and picked him up and held him so that Bryce could see him. "Hey, Jangles," said Bryce, "you look good. The last time I seen you, you looked terrible. Your head was busted in and—" "He is put together again," said Lucius, "as I promised you he would be." Bryce nodded. He wiped his hands across his nose. Here it is, a picture. "Can I hold him?" he asked. "No," said Lucius. Bryce nodded again. "Tell him goodbye," said Lucius Clark. "He is repaired. He has been saved. Now you must tell him goodbye." "Goodbye," said Bryce. "Don't go," thought Edward. "I won't be able to bear it if you go." "And now you must leave," said Lucius Clark. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. He stood without moving, looking at Edward. "Go," said Lucius Clark. "Go." "Please," thought Edward, "don't." Bryce turned. He walked through the door of the doll mender's shop. The door closed. The bell tinkled. And Edward was alone. And we will stop right there. We are almost done with the book. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I love it. I'll see you next time.